Hello, Wonderhussy here, out in the middle of nowhere, but not in the desert this time. No, sir, this time I'm way up in the beautiful, snow-covered Sierra Nevada mountains, which I'm sure someone will quibble with my calling them the snow-covered Sierra Nevada mountains because, well, it's superfluous. Sierra Nevada means snowy mountains in Spanish. So technically I'd be saying the snow-covered, snowy mountains. But you know what I mean. I'm in the Sierra, and it's a friggin' winter wonderland. And it's not even winter yet. Okay, I'm up here on November 30th. It's the last day of November. Winter doesn't technically start until December 22nd. And there's already a significant amount of snow all around me. I mean, you can see how deep my boots are sinking into this snow as I'm walking along here, making my way home from visiting my mom for Thanksgiving. That's right, my mom's been staying in the Sierra foothills, but over on the western slope of the Sierra, you know, down towards Sacramento-ish way. Well, I live in Death Valley, which is on the eastern side of the Sierra, and so if I want to get home, well, I might have to cross these here mountains one way or another, and I'm lucky that it hasn't been snowing a ton lately. I mean, obviously it did over the past few weeks, but the pass is clear. There's no snow chains required. They plowed the road, and it's a beautiful day for a drive. You know what I mean? Driving along in my nice, warm, cozy 4Runner with the heater blasting, listening to music, drinking hot coffee. So much easier to cross these mountains today with our modern automobiles than it was 100, 200 years ago. That's right. 200 years ago would have been, what, 1824? Okay, well, maybe not 200 years ago. The white man, for the most part, didn't start coming out here until like the 1840s, 1850s. But he did, in his insatiable lust for golden land. The white man dragged his wagons, wives, and children all the way over these mountains to get to California and strike it rich in the gold fields. Now, we've all heard of the Donner Party. I made a whole series of videos about that ill-fated group of pioneers that set off from Independence, Missouri in late April of 1846, I think it was. Oh gosh, I already forgot. And because they lollygagged and dawdled along the way and suffered a number of misfortunes along the way, well, they didn't get to the mountains in time to cross them before they got covered in snow, and consequently, well, they ended up trapped up in the mountains. Probably about 100 miles north of here, north of Lake Tahoe. I'm about 40 miles south of Lake Tahoe, where I am here on the side of Highway 88. I think they call it the Alpine Highway. It's absolutely beautiful. It goes from kind of south of Sacramento all the way to Markleyville on the east side. Anyway, they didn't have this highway back in the days when the pioneers and the Donner Party were trying to cross the Sierra, and, well, that's how the Donner Party got into all that trouble. They arrived at the foot of the Sierra just when it first started snowing, and they were unlucky the year that they crossed. I guess it was like an exceptionally early blizzard, and so the mountains were covered in snow and too much snow for them to drag their wagons through, and so they ended up having to try to tough it out all winter long, and, well, we all know the rest of that story. Remember, they ended up having to eat each other to survive. Well, you can see really easily just walking along here how difficult it would have been for them to try to leave, because a lot of people go, well, gee, Donner Party, why don't you just leave your wagons behind and head across on foot? You know, I'd rather tromp through snow than have to eat my neighbor to stay alive. Well, it wasn't that easy. First of all, I think there was even deeper snow where the Donner Party was than this, and this snow is already coming up to the tops of my boots, which would be tough enough to go tromping through, let alone without having to carry kids and supplies and food and camp gear. And I mean, they would have had to carry everything they needed to get across the mountains, and it just wasn't feasible. So anyway, you can go back and watch that whole series of videos I made if you're interested in the Donner Party. But that's actually not why I'm up here today. Okay, yes, I just happened to be driving along this beautiful snowy highway headed home to Death Valley, and I decided to pull over and take a look around because yes, there is an amazing view behind me here, but that's not the only reason I stopped at this particular place at the side of Highway 88. No, sir, there's supposed to be a lonely grave around here somewhere. Now, I looked it up on Google Maps, and there's lots of reviews. Lots of people have stopped there and taken photos, and it looks like a really interesting spot. Unfortunately, it's buried in snow, so I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to find it. But I'm gonna try my best. Okay, it's supposedly on the other side of the highway, just a little bit farther ahead there. So what I need to do is find a safe place to come down off of this snowbank and then cross this bizarrely busy highway and get to the other side. Kind of like I'm in that video game Frogger, if you ever played Frogger back in the day. Now I'm really dating myself. You had to be a little frog in the game who had to try to get across a busy highway without getting hit by a car or truck. Woo, woo, woo. Come on, little frogger, come on. We did it. Woo, we made it. And not a moment too soon because there's a truck barreling towards me. Whew! All right, well, now we're in the general vicinity of this grave, and I don't know if there's any marker or indication that we're going to be able to see with this much snow covering it, but according to Google Maps, and I do have a little bit of cell signal, it's somewhere in this area. Okay, it looks like there's kind of like a mound of rocks that people leave flowers on. That's the grave, and then there's supposed to be like a little plaque that some historical society put up. So if nothing else, I should see two little snow-covered mounds somewhere around here. Golly, imagine trying to stay on the trail to California through all this. I mean, if I didn't have that highway there, I know I'd be totally screwed. Okay, where is this thing? You know, I do still have something like 450 miles to go ahead of me to get home to Death Valley, and I don't have all day to be farting around looking for this lonely grave. But you know, now I'm kind of committed. I really want to find this grave so I can pay my respects. Okay, there's these metal stakes. I don't know if that indicates anything. Whoa, just broke through a hole in the snow and got buried up to my knee. Look at that. I mean, you can see exactly why the Donner Party couldn't just hike out of there. I mean, I'm lucky I have a warm car to get back into, and I've got extra pants I can change into if I need to. I can blast the heater. They didn't have any of that. And so it's remarkable that any of those people in the Donner Party survived at all. Oh, wait, I think I see it. I love it when I don't give up and I find what I was looking for. Oh my God. Okay, well, unfortunately, the grave itself is totally covered and we can't see it, but we can see the little marker, and then there's some kind of little informational plaque here. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think that pile of rocks is technically the grave. The real grave is somewhere out in that valley down there, or maybe on the other side of the highway. Anyway, let's see what the sign and the marker have to say. Okay, this picturesque snow-topped little marker has a picture of a Conestoga wagon, the wagons that the old pioneers used to get across the country, to get to California. The technical name for them was Conestoga wagon, but a lot of people called them prairie schooners because I guess they kind of like sailboats sailing across the prairie. You know, when there was like hundreds of them doing so, it must have looked like a regatta. Anyway, underneath the drawing of the wagon, it says, "Broken dreams and hope carried 2,000 miles through scorching deserts and over lofty mountains. At last, the site of the promised land. Those of you who visit..." Oh dear, the snow's too deep. We're gonna have to scoop it aside, and I don't have gloves with me. I'll use my boot. Let's see. Tamp it down. See what it says down. Oh, it goes on for quite a ways. Man, this snow's deeper than I thought. "Those of you who visit this grave carry a torch of love and hope which this young girl lost and pass it on to generations unborn. Rachel Melton was laid to rest." Something about a cold and frosty. Oh no, I can't read what it says about, I think it's supposed to be a maiden's grave. That's what it's called on Google Maps. A young maiden, a beautiful young maiden, died of who knows what, crossing the friggin' mountains with her family. Oh, I should have brought my shovel from my car. Ugh, oh golly, the most I can make out is Rachel Melton was laid to rest here, cold and frosty morning, October 4th, 1850. Oh, okay. I'll admit it, I'm a wuss. I was trying to dig the snow away with my hand, but oh my gosh. I'm from Death Valley. But, you know, like I said, this place is listed on Google Maps, and I think I have enough signal up here where I can just barely look at a picture somebody posted in the reviews. Aha! Now we can read the part that was hidden by snow. It says, Rachel Melton was laid to rest here on a cold and frosty morning, October 4th, 1850. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Then it says, donor, Sharky Begovich. Wow, so I guess somebody named Sharky Begovich paid for this monument. You know, I was expecting it to be the Clampers or the Native Daughters of the Golden West or someone like that, but good old Sharky Begovich, if you happen to be watching this video, salute. Thank you for putting up this marker to a lonely, lonely grave, which, like I said, isn't even actually here. I think it's, I don't know, somewhere they buried her somewhere in this beautiful valley, which if it wasn't covered in snow, I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous. But there is, I think, somewhere over here, maybe that mound there, is a pile of rocks that kind of looks like a grave. And that's where folks stop and leave flowers. In fact, one of the pictures I saw on Google had like a bunch of roses on it. And you know, if I had one of those golden space roses with me, I would have, well, I don't know if I would leave one of those up here. They're different in the desert. Like up here, it feels so pristine and, you know, nature, Ansel Adams, like leaving something as flashy as a golden space rose almost seems like it would be a sacrilege. So maybe it's for the best that I don't have a golden space rose to leave on that mound or by this monument or anywhere in this wintry landscape. I mean, yes, it is cold, but it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's really sad to think of this young girl. I think, I don't know if I read this somewhere or somehow I just got the impression she was about 16 years old. You know, probably just getting ready to court some guy and get married and start a family of her own. But, you know, her parents dragged her over the mountains to California and she was probably excited. I'm sure it was like the adventure of her life. I mean, put yourself in Rachel Melton's shoes. You know, you're 15, 16-year-old girl living in Missouri. You know your dad's about to marry you off to some farmer and you're going to spend the rest of your life a farmer's wife in Missouri. Well, there's nothing wrong with being a farmer's wife in Missouri. There's plenty of fine farmer's wives in Missouri, but maybe young Rachel Melton wanted more. Maybe she wanted adventure. Maybe Rachel Melton's brother, let's just say his name was Robert Melton. Robert was going to strike out for the gold field. Maybe he did. He struck out for the gold fields in 1849 to go get rich in California. And maybe Rachel and Robert had always been close growing up, and Rachel really wanted to go with him, but back then, girls couldn't do that. And then, well, what if Rachel even considered just striking out on her own and going west and finding other work? You know, there was work available to women out west. I won't profane the site of her grave by saying what it is, but who knows? She might have been an adventurous spirit and wanted to get to California whatever way she could. So when her parents announced that they were going to uproot the whole family and take them west, well, she was probably pretty excited about it. You know, not like nowadays when parents tell a 15-year-old they're moving across the country and they got to change high schools and leave all their friends behind. And so all they do is complain, I don't want to go to California. Back then, I'll bet you anything, Rachel Melton looked upon it as a massive adventure. In fact, that's something I did read about the pioneers. A lot of them considered it the adventure of a lifetime, and they would keep a little scrap of the canvas on their Conestoga wagon as like a souvenir. Even after they settled in California and, you know, built a farmhouse and had a ranch or whatever, they'd keep a little scrap of that fabric as a reminder of the biggest adventure of their lives. I mean, think about what an adventure that would be to cross 2,000 miles of America in a wagon. And, you know, there might be dangerous Indians, you'd see buffalo, you'd see all kind of animals you'd never seen, you'd see all these crazy rock formations and mountains like you'd never seen. It really would have been the adventure of a lifetime. And so I like to think that poor Rachel Melton was excited to embark on this adventure. But then, unfortunately, something happened along the way, and I'm not sure if we'll ever know what she died of. A lot of people on the immigrant trail died of, I think, typhoid, because they didn't practice the best sanitary habits. Like, they would camp by a creek and they would pee and poop close to the creek, and so the creek water would get contaminated and then drinking the creek water, and they didn't know enough to boil water back then. So disease is probably what got her. I don't know if it was typhoid. It could have been any number of other things. I mean, they said it was a cold, frosty morning. Maybe she got pneumonia. You know, we might never know what happened to poor Rachel Melton. Or will we? There's another plaque right here, and I just happened to see out of the corner of my eye. It starts out, "Who is really buried here?" Okay, I haven't read this yet myself, so let's read it together. Who is really buried in the maiden's grave? Who is the maiden? Who is buried here if not the maiden? A mystery. Okay, it says, Maiden's Grave is a popular roadside stop that commemorates the death of a young woman during the overland migration in 1850. Around 1900, an elderly woman looking for the gravesite of her daughter started a series of events that identified the wrong grave as that of her daughter. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. So around 1900, which kind of almost seems like recent modern history, well, that was only 50 years after whoever is buried here died. And so this woman, gosh, imagine that. She was probably a young mother of, 30, if that, headed west with her family. Her daughter died. They had to bury her along the side of the road. I'm sure that haunted her for the rest of her life. And so even though they probably went on to claim some fat, juicy land in Napa or Monterey or some beautiful place that's worth billions of dollars today, and she had this very comfortable life in a nice farmhouse, I'm sure the thought never left the back of her mind that her poor daughter is buried up in those snow-covered mountains. And I'm sure every winter when she looked out at the Sierras, if she lived within eyesight of the Sierra, she probably thought about her poor daughter up there, shivering in the snow, and then when it rained, her poor daughter getting wet, and then when it was hot in the summertime, oh, her poor daughter. I mean, it must have really weighed on her. And so when she finally had the means to go looking for that grave, she probably wanted to go put up a headstone, a memorial, create something fancier than, they must have just basically had enough time and energy to basically dig a grave, bury her, and maybe put 2 sticks crossed. You know what I mean? It's not like they could dawdle here very long building a beautiful grave for her, because they had to get across the mountains before what happened to the Donner Party happened to them. And remember, this happened in 1850, which was 4 years after the Donner Party, and the Donner Party story was very well known. It was kind of a cautionary tale that was printed in all the newspapers so that all these people who thought they'd go west and get rich, could read it and understand how serious this journey was and how important it was to cross the Sierras before it started snowing. And so the people who buried this poor, lonely maiden probably knew that they really couldn't fart around very long. And so they probably just dug the most expedient, efficient grave they could, covered it with rocks, slapped up a couple sticks, and then continued along their way to get down to the other side before it started snowing. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that her mother, once she did have the means and the ability to come back up here in 1900, they didn't really have automobiles yet in 1900, but I don't know, somehow she had the means. Maybe they didn't settle very far from here, maybe they just settled right down the western slope, and they could take the mules up here for the day and try to find that lonely grave and make a better, more permanent marker for it. I don't know. Let's read the rest of this sign before we get carried away imagining what if. Okay, at 2 different times, 2 headstones were installed at a location along busy Highway 88. The site came to honor the maiden and many others that died on their journey to California. Historical research in 1989 disclosed that a young man was buried here, and that the young woman, or maiden, was buried in a meadow 2 miles to the east. Oh, gosh, so she's buried way over that way, 2 miles that way. It doesn't say if they ever found her grave or not, but it does say that they did figure out who is buried right here. So apparently that mound of rocks, which I'm guessing is under that poof of snow there, really is a grave. It's just not the grave of Rachel Melton, the mysterious maiden. Okay, it says, on October 4th, 1850, William Edmondson wrote in his diary, "After traveling 6 miles, we came to Tragedy Springs. After traveling 2 miles further, we came to a trading post about noon where we camped, having come 8 miles today. A young man from Henry County named Alan Melton died at this place during the night. Oh gosh, so there was a trading post here. Well, that kind of changes things a little bit. I mean, I was picturing them being completely alone in the wilderness. Like I was saying earlier, we have the highway to follow. How would they have known? First of all, there was no trail covered in snow or not. Like, I guess they were just navigating by the stars and the sun. They knew they had to head west, but if there was a trading post here, at least they could have gotten some kind of directions. And I mean, I don't know if they would be able to resupply. A trading post here must have been in 1850. There must have not been anything there other than maybe one guy on a 3-legged dog. I mean, 1850, this really was the middle of nowhere. There weren't that many people in California. Yes, the 49ers, the gold rush had already started, but this far up in the mountains, I can't imagine that it was a very big or busy trading post. And it certainly wasn't the kind of trading post where there were 2 old men playing checkers on a barrel full of cornmeal in front of a pot-bellied stove. I mean, it must have been something very rustic and very simple. You know, like a log cabin with a sheet of burlap hanging over the door or something. Gosh, I can't imagine. Okay, well, let's see what the rest of this sign says. It says, Alan Melton was buried near here. No one knows the exact location because of highway realignment when the rocks marking the original location were moved. Caltrans? How are you going to move somebody's grave just to build a highway? Oh gosh. No telling how many Native American cemeteries have been moved in the name of progress. Not just building highways, but suburban houses. Remember Poltergeist? Remember that movie Poltergeist? They built the family's house on the Indian graveyard, and I think that's kind of where all the trouble started. So yeah, I don't think the government or Caltrans has any problem at all moving one lonely grave. Let's see, what does it say? This memorial commemorates the life and death of Alan Melton of Henry County, Iowa, and all the others who suffered and died during the Great Western Migration. Please take a moment to reflect on the hardships they endured in order to follow their dreams. Wow, Henry County, Iowa. Anyone here watching from Henry County, Iowa? Are there still any Meltons in Henry County? I'll bet you there are. Isn't that wild to think? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't that long ago. 1850 was, what? Oh, I'm so bad at math. 174 years ago. You know, that's how many generations? 4 or 5 generations? Not that long ago. Or I don't know, maybe that's more than 4 or 5 generations. Like I said, I'm not good at math. Anyway, it says this marker was dedicated 20 years ago, October 4th, 2004, dedicated jointly with the Amador County Sesquicentennial Committee. Sesquicentennial is a fancy word for 150-year anniversary, I think. Anyway, it was a joint dedication with the Sesquicentennial Committee, the U.S. Forest Service, the Amador County Historical Society, and the Oregon and California Trails Association. And no clampers. Color me shocked. I know the clampers are very active in this part of the country, which is sort of known as the mother lode. It's where all the richest, juiciest gold deposits were found back in the gold rush. But apparently the clampers didn't get here in time. I don't know. Anyway, it's cool that all those other groups exist and were able to put... Well, I guess they didn't put that one up. That was that one dude or woman. They did this buzzkill plaque that's basically saying that monument there is BS. Gosh, I wonder if there was any saltiness or hard feelings on the part of... Oh gosh, I forget what the guy's name was. It was written on the... It's written at the bottom under the snow, but I wonder if he or she was salty when this other group of haters came along and had to post a plaque saying that his plaque was a bunch of hooey. But then again, maybe he was glad to have the mystery cleared up and, you know, the record set straight. Either way, I think it's cool for poor Alan Melton that he is getting his due recognition. And, you know, if you're as sharp as I am, you probably noticed that Alan Melton and Rachel Melton have the same last name. So could that have been her brother? Oh, maybe his name wasn't Robert. It was Alan. And he died first, and then she died 2 miles down the road. Gosh, I don't know. How does that make any sense? I mean, maybe they were both sick. It was going around, you know, the pneumonia or typhoid or whatever it was. Maybe they both had it, and he died here, and they buried him. And then they managed to load everybody up and make it another 2 miles, and then she died immediately after him. I mean, talk about a 1-2 punch for her mother. But if her mother was out here looking for her daughter's grave, well, I guess she already knew where her son's grave was? Or maybe the mother that was looking for her daughter's grave was a different mother? I don't know. There's a lot of questions here at this lonely, snow-covered gravesite. But one thing's for sure. These mountains are probably littered with lonely graves. Because I can't remember off the top of my head, and the signal's not good enough to look up exactly how many people migrated overland to California back in the 1850s, but it was thousands, many thousands. I want to say 200,000, but I'm just pulling that number out of you know where, so don't quote me on that. Anyway, many thousands of people crossed over the mountains, through the deserts, the plains, the whole shebang from Missouri to California back in those days, and so there's graves everywhere. And that's why it's so cool that there's all these historical groups that have the time and interest and dedication to put these little markers up to commemorate at least a few of them. So that's why I think it's cool that this marker says it's not just for Alan Melton, it's also for all the others who suffered and died during the Great Western Migration. This plaque isn't just for Alan, it's not even for the Maiden, it's for everyone who suffered and died on that treacherous journey. I wonder if they count the Native Americans in those suffering people, because Lord knows there were plenty of Native Americans who suffered and died during the Western migration. I mean, they might not have been migrating themselves, but we all know how much they suffered. Anyway, I'm freezing, and now my butt's kind of wet from squatting in the snow, and I still have 450 miles to drive and many hours to go before I sleep. So I'm going to leave this lonely grave at the side of the highway, 7,500 plus feet above sea level in the mighty Sierra. But before I go, let's all take a minute to remember Alan Melton, Rachel Melton, all the other pioneers, and all the Native Americans who suffered and died during the Great Western Migration. R.I.P. Alan Melton. And R.I.P. Maiden. I mean, ain't that always the way? Some poor dude dies, but they gotta sex it up and make it about a young girl. I smell the influence of Hollywood. Or maybe that's just the way of mankind. Anyway, R.I.P. both of you guys. You're only 2 miles apart either way, so maybe you're keeping each other company in the afterlife. Or more than likely, they're driving each other nuts through all of eternity, because what if they were that kind of brother and sister who hated each other? You know, she was the annoying little sister who always wanted to climb up in his treehouse, and oh man, now he's stuck with her until the end of time. Anyway, I'm freezing. I'm going to get in my car and head on down the road out of this snow country and back to the desert.